The dative in German is the third case that indicates the indirect object of a sentence. So it's the thing or person that answers the questions to what and to whom. Was, wem. The dative can also answer where, wo, because it indicates that something is addressed to something else. The case's grammatical changes involve modifying articles, adjectives, pronouns, and nouns. Adjectives and pronouns are for future videos, but articles and nouns will be explained in this video. Initially, it's important to understand the patterns for all nouns and how they get modified when singular and plural, as I already explained in my previous videos. In German, you can find masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns that have the following endings, and to pluralize them, we follow these patterns. In the dative, grammatical changes will happen not only in the articles, but also in noun endings. So in this case, it's very vital to pay attention to the endings of nouns and articles. Unlike the previous cases that have a small difference in the articles, the dative will borrow some articles from both the nominative and accusative. However, do not confuse them just because they look the same. Just because an article is identical to an article in a different sentence, it doesn't mean that it's the same case. In the dative, we carefully have to pay attention to what gender each article will correspond to, because the case identically borrows articles, although some will change. The definite articles are dem, der, dem, din, and the indefinite articles are einem, einer, einem. As you can see, the masculine and neuter definite articles changed, and they even share the same articles. But the feminine article is borrowed from the nominative, and the plural is borrowed from the accusative. Do not confuse them with other cases because in the dative they have different meanings. A good technique to remember this is to use the indefinite articles more. But even so, look at the endings of the articles. Dem and einem end in im, and the dative question wem ends in m. So im is a ubiquitous ending in the dative. To tell that a sentence is dative, look at the article ending, and other contexts will also tell that it's dative. So, the masculine dative articles are dem, einem. The feminine dative articles are der, einer. The neuter dative articles are dem, einem, the same as the masculine, and the plural article for all of them is din. These patterns will immensely help in understanding how nouns and articles function in the dative. However, the case has additional functions when it comes to indirect objects. To understand it more, other grammatical concepts need to be known, and they are verbs and prepositions that the dative uses. These concepts will be used a lot in the examples that I will show, but I will not use all of them. In the examples, there will be grammar that you don't know yet, but don't worry about it. For now, focus on how the dative changes. To avoid any confusion with other cases, we can follow these patterns. 1. Look for dative prepositions. 2. Look for dative verbs. And 3. Check if a noun is an indirect object by asking to what, to whom, and where. Always ask if a verb requires an indirect object, and if it does, it's dative. Moreover, such fixed verbs and prepositions always require the dative, so it's useful to memorize them together. Along with nouns and articles, the dative uses the following common verbs: entvoten, danken, geben, folgen, gehorren, glauben, helfen, passen, vertrauen, zuhören. Notice that all of these verbs function by addressing something to something else, which is how indirect objects work. By asking to what or to whom, it's understandable why these verbs work in the dative. The case also works with the following prepositions that have multiple meanings: aus, neben, mit, seit, von, zu. Again, notice how these prepositions function by addressing something to something else. Also, they work with direction and location, which explains why asking where works in the dative. All of these concepts activate the dative because they work with indirect objects, location, addressing something to something else, and direction. This is what makes up the dative case, and it should not be confused with other cases. Let's begin with masculine nouns. Here, we have sentences with the verb helfen. Ich helfe dem Hund. Ich helfe einem Hund. To pluralize them, change the article and noun. Ich helfe den Hunden. These sentences are dative because of the articles and the verb helfen that works in the case. By asking, I help to whom, we know it's dative. However, when the sentence is plural, Hunden ends in N, even though it should end in E. This is done on purpose, and it's an extremely vital rule in German. In the dative specifically, we must add in to a plural noun if it doesn't end in N or S. The N ending in the dative plural is a remnant of older German where nouns had distinct endings. Over time, many of these endings disappeared, but the dative plural retained the N ending. This helps indicate the grammatical role of a dative plural noun. Because German relies on declensions, the N ending provides extra information, making the sentence less confusing. In is added to dative plural nouns, but only if the plural form doesn't already end in N or S. This explains why Hunden receives an N, because Hunde doesn't end in N. This rule is very important to know. Here, we again have the verb helfen. Ich helfe dem Jungen. Ich helfe einem Jungen. To pluralize it, change the article. Ich helfe den Jungen. These sentences are dative because of the articles and the verb. Let's not forget that Junge is a weak masculine singular noun, which is why it ends in N, and colloquially, it's possible to say Jungs. This noun does not require an extra N because it already ends in N or S. Here we have the verb antworten. Ich antworte dem Lehrer. Ich antworte einem Lehrer. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Ich antworte den Lehrern. In this case, an extra N is needed because the plural noun doesn't end in N. It's dative because of the articles, the verb, and the noun ending. Here we have the verb danken. Ich danke dem Studenten. Ich danke einem Studenten. To pluralize it, change the article. Ich danke den Studenten. Student is a weak masculine singular noun, which is why it ends in in. It's dative because of the articles and the verb. Here we have the verb geben. Ich gebe es dem Mann. Ich gebe es einem Mann. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Ich gebe es den Männern. In this case, we add in because Männer doesn't end in n. It's dative because of the articles, the verb, and the noun ending. Here we have a preposition that works in the dative. Du kommst aus dem Park. Du kommst aus einem Park. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Du kommst aus den Parks. In this case, we do not need an extra n because Parks already ends in s. It's dative because of the preposition and articles, and we can even ask from where, which further shows that the sentence is dative. Let's continue with feminine nouns. Here we have another preposition. Ist neben der Katze. Ist neben einer Katze. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Ist neben den Katzen. It's dative because of the preposition and articles. Here we have the verb vertrauen. Ich vertraue der Theorie. Ich vertraue einer Theorie. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Ich vertraue den Theorien. It's dative because of the verb and articles. Here we have the verb gehören. Das gehört der Frau. Das gehört einer Frau. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Das gehört den Frauen. It's dative because of the verb and articles. It's worth pointing out that almost all German plural feminine nouns don't require an extra n, because their natural endings already end in n. Let's finish with neuter nouns and articles. Neuter articles in the dative are the same as in the masculine, so the context of the nouns will show the difference. Here, we have the verb glauben. Ich glaube dem Mädchen. Ich glaube einem Mädchen. To pluralize it, change the article. Ich glaube den Mädchen. Here, we have the verb zuhören. Hört zu dem Musikinstrument. Hört zu einem Musikinstrument. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Hört zu den Musikinstrumenten. In this case, an extra N is required. Here, we have the verb folgen. Ich folge dem Drama. Ich folge einem Drama. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Ich folge den Dramen. Here, we have a preposition. Wir kamen aus dem Haus. Wir kamen aus einem Haus. To pluralize it, change the article and noun. Wir kamen aus dem Häusern. In this case, an extra N is required, and we can also ask from where, which further shows that it's dative. Overall, this is the general system of nouns and articles in the dative, so this concept applies to most nouns in German. Don't forget that the dative also modifies pronouns and adjectives, and those will be explained in future videos.